She wasn't singing for fame, she was singing to survive. The echo of her voice filled the cold subway tunnels, where strangers passed by without knowing that behind that song was a dream she had buried long ago. But one day, fate decided to stop and listen, and her life would never be the same again. The subway tunnels of New York were never quiet. The roar of trains, the rush of footsteps, and the endless hum of the city above made it a place where most people moved quickly, never pausing long enough to notice anything but their destination. Yet in a corner near the 42nd Street station, a young woman named Elena stood every evening with a battered guitar slung over her shoulder, her voice rising above the chaos like a fragile bird trying to soar in a storm. She wasn't there because she loved the damp air or the graffiti-stained walls, she was there because she had no other stage, no other chance, and no other choice. Elena had come to New York 3 years ago with dreams that could fill skyscrapers. Born in a small town in Ohio, she had grown up singing in church choirs and school plays, her voice a gift that many told her was destined for more. Her mother had worked 2 jobs to help her audition for music schools, but rejection after rejection had left her with only broken confidence and unpaid bills. By the time her mother fell sick and passed away, Elena's savings were gone, her apartment was lost, and her only option was to sing on subway platforms for a few dollars dropped into her open guitar case. At first, it felt humiliating, singing to strangers who rarely looked up, performing with aching feet and an empty stomach. But over time, the subway became both her prison and her sanctuary. It was the only place where her voice could still breathe, even if nobody cared to listen. She sang not for applause but to keep herself from disappearing. Every evening, she would strum her guitar and sing with her eyes closed, pouring her pain and longing into the songs she wrote. Maybe someone will hear me, she whispered to herself many nights, maybe someone will see me. But as the months passed, hope became a fragile thread, ready to snap at any moment. And then, on a winter night when the city above was wrapped in snow, and Elena's hands were numb from the cold, someone stopped, really stopped, and everything began to change. The man had been walking with his collar pulled up, his breath visible in the frigid air, his mind distracted by 1,000 thoughts that came with his job. He was Daniel Harris, a well-known music producer who had spent 2 decades in the industry discovering voices that would go on to win awards and sell out arenas. But in recent years, he had grown disillusioned. The industry felt shallow now, full of auto-tuned perfection but empty of soul. He missed the raw, unfiltered magic that had made him fall in love with music in the first place. As he hurried down the steps of the subway that night, he wasn't looking for magic, he was just trying to escape the cold. But then he heard it. A voice, trembling yet powerful, echoing through the tunnels in a way that made him stop mid-step. It wasn't just the sound, it was the emotion behind it, the kind that crawled under your skin and refused to let go. He followed the sound until he saw her, a young woman with a worn-out coat, eyes closed as she sang, her guitar case open with only a few coins scattered inside. Daniel stood frozen, listening as her voice swelled with a haunting mix of strength and fragility. The lyrics spoke of loss, of holding on when everything was breaking, of wanting to be seen in a world that looked away. He felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. He waited until the song ended, and as the commuters rushed past, he stepped closer. Elena opened her eyes to see a stranger staring at her intently. She expected him to walk away like everyone else, but instead, he dropped $100 bill into her case. She blinked in shock. "That's too much," she whispered. But Daniel only smiled faintly. "No. That's not nearly enough." Her heart skipped. Nobody had ever said something like that to her before. He introduced himself, not with the arrogance of a producer but with the quiet sincerity of a man who had been moved. "You have something," he said. "Something real. What's your name?" For the first time in years, Elena felt a flicker of hope. She didn't know it yet, but that night was the first page of a new chapter, the chapter where her dream would finally step out of the subway shadows. Elena didn't believe him at first. Too many people had told her she was talented, but not enough. Too many promises had turned to dust before she could grasp them. When Daniel gave her his card and told her to meet him at his studio the next day, she tucked it into her pocket but half expected it to be a cruel joke. That night, she barely slept, torn between doubt and possibility. By morning, her nerves nearly convinced her not to go, but something stronger pushed her forward. When she walked into the studio, her breath caught. It wasn't glamorous, it was raw, filled with instruments, wires, and an energy that felt alive. Daniel greeted her warmly, offering her tea instead of judgment. "Just sing," he said. "No pressure, no expectations. Just let it out." And she did. With trembling hands on her guitar, she sang one of her own songs, a piece she had written after her mother's death. The words poured out like open wounds, and Daniel sat in silence, his eyes glistening. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment, and then he whispered, "This is what the world needs. Not perfect voices. Honest ones." From that day on, he began mentoring her. He helped her record demos, refine her sound, and connect with people in the industry. But more than that, he gave her something she thought she had lost forever: belief. For the first time, someone saw her not as a girl begging for coins in a subway but as an artist with a voice worth hearing. Weeks turned into months, and Elena found herself growing, not just as a singer but as a person. She learned discipline, resilience, and the courage to face rejection without letting it define her. And slowly, word about her began to spread. First, small gigs in coffee shops. Then, invitations to perform at open mics and charity events. Each time she sang, people stopped to listen, not out of pity but out of awe. The subway singer was becoming something more. Yet, deep down, Elena still carried fear. What if this was temporary? What if it all collapsed again? Daniel reminded her often, "Your story is your strength. Don't hide it. Share it. That's what makes people connect." And so she kept singing, each note a step toward the future she had once thought impossible. The breakthrough came on a night Elena would never forget. Daniel had arranged for her to perform at a small showcase where industry insiders were invited. She stood backstage, her hands shaking, her heart racing. This was nothing like the subway. This was her chance, and the weight of it nearly crushed her. "Remember," Daniel whispered before she walked out, "don't sing to impress them. Sing like you did in the subway, sing because you have to." She took a deep breath, stepped into the light, and began. At first, the room was polite but distracted, as industry crowds often were. But as her voice filled the space, conversations faded. Glasses were set down. Eyes turned toward her. And by the time she reached the final note, the room erupted in applause. For Elena, it was more than clapping, it was validation, recognition, and the beginning of everything she had ever dreamed. Within weeks, she was offered her first recording deal. Interviews followed, then performances on bigger stages. The subway singer had become the rising star everyone wanted to know. But Elena never forgot where it began. She still visited the 42nd Street station sometimes, standing in the corner where her journey had started, singing not for money but for gratitude. Strangers passing by would stop, take out their phones, and whisper, "Isn't that the girl from the radio?" She would smile, strum her guitar, and keep singing, because fame had never been the dream, connection had. Years later, standing on a stage in front of thousands, Elena shared her story. "I sang in the subway not because I wanted the world to hear me," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "I sang because I was afraid of losing myself." And then one person stopped, one person believed, and that changed everything. If you hear someone singing in the dark, listen. You might just hear the voice that will change the world. The audience rose to their feet, and as the applause thundered, Elena realized that her mother's dream for her, her own dream, and the dream of every struggling artist had finally found its place in the light. Sometimes, the smallest act of listening can change someone's life forever. If Elena's story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder to never give up on their dreams. And remember, kindness, belief, and a moment of attention can be the spark that turns someone's darkness into light.